Some names get written into fashion history in permanent ink, and some get erased in pencil, easy to smudge, easy to forget, easy to pretend it never mattered. But today, we're not letting that happen again, because if you've ever seen a swirl of color that feels like movement, joy, and pure attitude stitched into fabric, if you've ever watched a model hit the runway and thought, this isn't just clothes, this is a whole mood, there's a strong chance that you've already felt the influence of Stephen Burrows, whether you know his name or not. Right there is the problem, and the reason that this episode matters. Stephen Burrows is one of those designers whose fingerprints are actually everywhere on the runway, in the way that we understand modern glamour, in the way that we read sexy and sporty and elegant all at once. Yet he's really centered the way that he should be when fashion tells its own story. In this chapter of the Black Fashion Archives, we're going to do, again, what mainstream archives often don't. We're going to place Stephen Burrows right where he belongs, front and center. We're going to talk about how he broke through, how he changed silhouettes, how he made color feel like music, why his work still looks fresh, and how the industry celebrated the vibe while too often sidelining the visionary. Here's the question I want to sit with you. How can a designer be so influential and still be treated like a footnote? Listen, stay with me on this one, because once you see what Stephen Burrows did, you'll never look at modern fashion the same way again. To understand Stephen Burrows, you have to understand the era that he helped electrify and the walls he was expected to stop. But the late 1960s into the 1970s, fashion was shifting. Youth culture had teeth. Music, nightlife, and street style were rewriting what high fashion even meant. But the gatekeeping, as always, was still very real, especially for Black designers. Access wasn't just about talent. Talent was never the issue. Access was about who had the right networks, who was allowed into the rooms where careers were decided, and who got the benefit of being viewed as visionary instead of a trend. Stephen Burrows didn't politely ask for permission. He showed up with a point of view so bold the industry had no choice but to pay attention.
So that time period between 1966 and 1969, because things really began to happen around that time, right?
Yes, it was the beginning.
It was the beginning. So what was going through your head? I mean, knowing what you know now.
That I could make money, it's something I like to do, was the impetus for the whole thing. And I had friends who wanted me to make them the clothes I was wearing, and that's how I got started.
Color speaks to me. What does it say to you? Because you use it so strongly in your work.
Well, it's just, I love color. I love strong color. I love well-saturated color. I guess I inherited that from my mother and father.
His point of view was alive. When people talk about Burrows, you'll hear certain words over and over: color, movement, energy, and fluidity, because his designs weren't meant to just sit still. They were meant to dance. They were meant to follow the body, flirt with the light, catch the eye across the room, and make the wearer feel like the main character before she even speaks. That is not a small thing. That is design as empowerment. One of the signatures that keeps coming up when you study his work is the way that he could combine a sleek, body-conscious silhouette with a playful, almost athletic ease. Like, he understood the glamour didn't have to be stiff to be expensive looking. What he did was actually gave women clothing that felt sensual and confident without looking like it was trying too hard.
Ladies and gentlemen, the fashions of Stephen Burrows.
If you pay really close attention, he had a gift for creating pieces that felt effortless while actually being incredibly intentional. And then there's the detail that fashion heads recognize immediately. The famous lettuce edge finish, those wavy rippling hems that look like they're in motion when the wearer is standing still. It's one of those design choices that seems simple until you realize how iconic it became. That edge isn't just a hem, it's a signature. It's a visual rhythm. It's Stephen Burrows saying, "My clothes have a pulse." Now here's where it gets even more interesting and honestly a little infuriating if you care about the way that history gets recorded. Stephen Burrows became part of a fashion key moment in America when a new wave of designers began to define what American fashion could actually look like outside of European approval. This was a time when fashion was increasingly connected to nightlife, to celebrity, to culture, as it happened in real time. Burroughs' work felt right at home in that world because it didn't just exist in culture, it matched the tempo of the culture. And you can't talk about Stephen Burrows without acknowledging how his designs spoke to the feeling of the era, what it actually meant to be bold, to be seen, to take up space. That matters deeply when you're talking about a Black designer navigating in an industry that loved Black influence but didn't always love Black ownership.
I think it's time that we go back and look at some more of your pretty clothes, if it's all right with you.
Right.
Anyway, it's been a pleasure seeing you, young man. Continued good success.
Thank you.
And be as brilliant as you are so far, please. We're very proud of you. Stephen Burrows, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's be honest here, folks. Fashion has a long, long history of embracing Black aesthetics while making Black creators fight twice as hard for half the credit. So Burrows' success wasn't just about making beautiful clothing. It was about making a statement, sometimes loudly, about excellence, about insisting that Black creativity belongs in the luxury conversation without apology.
He is the Cody Award winner for 1973 and 1974, and I think the most well-known young Black designer in America, Mr. Stephen Burrows. Mr. Burrows. But how long have you been designing?
About 6 years.
About 6
7
years. You're a graduate of school here in New York City?
Yes, Fashion Institute of Technology.
The Fashion Institute of Technology. You began here, and where? Not at Bendel.
No, Old Boutique.
And what is Old Boutique?
It was like a little bazaar shop where they sold art and clothes.
Yes.
That's how it started out. And then, as we grew, clothes took over.
Well, how did they find you? Or did you find them?
We met at a summer place, and this guy had an idea to open a bazaar that had art and clothes.
What also makes Burrows so compelling is how modern his approach still feels. If you look at today's runways, this obsession with movement and sporty luxury, with color as attitude, with clothes designed for the camera and the dance floor and the street all at once. You're looking at a world that Stephen Burrows helped map out decades ago. And if you are a viewer who loves fashion, this is where the rabbit hole gets good. Because once you start learning what to look for, those rippling edges, those saturated color stories, those silhouettes that hug but don't restrict, then you start spotting his influence everywhere. And that's what the archives are about. That's why the archives matter. Because if we don't preserve that story correctly, what's going to happen is this. The look survives, but the name disappears. The blueprint gets adopted, but the architect gets left out of the caption. The industry keeps remixing the magic while the originator becomes a trivia question instead of a headline. And that's the part that we're correcting right here. Stephen Burrows isn't a hidden gem. He's not a fun fact. He's not an optional chapter. He's a foundational designer whose work helped shape the language of American fashion, especially the kind of fashion that feels alive and in motion and unforgettable in color. When we place him in the archive, we're not doing charity here. We're doing accuracy. And if you ever wondered why so many Black pioneers get celebrated quietly while their peers get celebrated loudly, well, Stephen Burrows is one of the clearest examples of why you can't rely on mainstream fashion history to tell the whole truth. Truth has always been curated. The truth has always been protected. The truth has to be repeated until it becomes impossible to ignore. Because the minute you truly understand Stephen Burrows' impact, the question becomes unavoidable. How many times, how many names are missing simply because nobody insisted on remembering to shout them out loud? Stephen Burrows is proof that Black fashion history isn't just a side story, it's a driving force. It's the energy in the silhouette, the confidence in the color, the movement in the hem, and the attitude that turns clothing into presence. And if this episode did what it was supposed to do, you're not just walking away with a name, you're walking away with a new lens. You're going to start recognizing influence. You are going to start asking, who originated what? You're going to start noticing when fashion celebrates the aesthetic, but forgets the artist. That's what Black Fashion Archives is here to do. Not just to entertain you, but sharpen your eye and protect our legacy from becoming somebody else's inspiration with no credit attached. We're not just letting these stories fade. Not on our watch.